Ah, the sea. If we humans, we love anything, it's going where we don't belong. Oh, and also knocking 7 bells out of each other once we get there. So, combining these two favorite pastimes, please join us on an oceanic odyssey through the 10 most incredible battleships ever to have sailed. The HMS Victory. Built in 1765, the HMS Victory was, at the time, the biggest ship ever constructed. Over her illustrious career, the ship played roles in the American War of Independence, the Napoleonic War, and fittingly was Nelson's flagship during his famous victory at the Battle of Trafalgar. Did you see what we did there? The Victory may be the oldest commissioned warship in the world, but if she was Britain's proudest moment, then perhaps our next ship is their greatest shame. The Mikasa. Commissioned by the Japanese and built in a place called Barrow-in-Furness, UK, in 1899, the battleship Mikasa is the oldest surviving pre-dreadnought battleship in the world. Shamefully for the Brits, however, this 120-year-old ironclad and the newest surviving British battleship, which says a lot about how the British look after their ships. Well, except the Victory, and the Unicorn, and the… Alright, I'll shut up. Anyway, the Mikasa played a pivotal role as the flagship of the Japanese fleet during the Battle of Tsushima. During the battle, the Japanese Navy destroyed 2/3 of the Russian fleet in the Tsushima Strait between Korea and southern Japan. It was the first time in history that wireless technology had played a major part in a sea battle, and that combined with the Mikasa's greater speed and firepower helped herald a new dawn in naval warfare. The Mutsu. We're staying with Japan for 2 good reasons. 1, on the day she was launched in 1921, the Mutsu was the fastest, most powerful warship on the planet. And 2, for the first time, the Japanese had built the ship themselves. The Mutsu, a Nagato-class super dreadnought, was the first ship on Earth to have 16-foot mounted guns. Ironically, the Mutsu would survive a number of wars only to be destroyed by her own guns. On the 8th of June 1943, a shell in the Mutsu's turret number 3 mysteriously detonated and split the great ship in 2. Tragically, the only significant event that day was a visit by a group of air cadets. Of her 1,474-man crew and 149 visitors aboard that day, just 353 crew and 13 cadets survived. What is now recognized as Japan's worst naval disaster. The Prince Eugene. The Prince Eugene was technically a heavy cruiser, but it was her part in the infamous double act with the battleship Bismarck and her unsinkable nature that has earned her a place in our top 10. At the height of the Second World War, in a daring bid to break out into the Atlantic Ocean, the Bismarck and the Prince Eugene ran the gauntlet of the British naval fleet. Not only that, the pair managed to heavily damage the Prince of Wales, and even more impressively, they managed to sink them. All but invincible British battleship, the mighty HMS Hood. This was to be the end of the Prince Eugene's good fortune, however, and despite a few other minor victories, the ship was plagued by technical and engine problems. The ship did survive World War II intact, despite a British revenge attack which nearly sank her off the coast of Norway. Indeed, the Prince Eugene is one of the few ships on Earth which could claim to have survived a nuclear attack, after it emerged unscathed during nuclear trials at Bikini Atoll. USS Arizona. The Arizona was built in Brooklyn, New York between 1914 and 15. Alongside her sister ship, the Pennsylvania, she was one of the only 2 Pennsylvania-class battleships ever built. Upon her launch, the USS Arizona was the heaviest armed vessel in the U.S. Navy. She boasted 12 14-feet guns. She was also the largest ship in the U.S. fleet at 185 meters long and weighing 31,400 tons. The USS Arizona was pivotal in the Second World War, despite the fact she never fired a shot. In fact, it was the sinking of the Arizona, amongst other vessels in a Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, which galvanized U.S. support for the Second World War, leading to the U.S. joining the Allied war effort. Legend has it that when she was struck by a Japanese bomb, the subsequent explosion ignited munitions on board, causing a secondary detonation so powerful that the ship actually left the water for a second. In all, 1,177 souls lost their lives on board the Arizona. On May 30, 1962, a memorial was officially dedicated. Part of the funds to build the memorial were raised by a benefit concert by none other than Elvis Presley. The Tripits and the Tall Boy. The Tripits is the lesser-known sister of the Bismarck. Built in the dry docks of Wilhelmshaven, the Tripits had a long-standing feud with the British Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy. The Brits first tried to destroy the ship before she was even built and rained bombs down on her cradle in the docks of Wilhelmshaven. They were unsuccessful, but their efforts didn't end there. The Germans, realizing the ship had become a prize target, based her in Norwegian waters. This meant she was far enough from the front line to be considered a serious target, but equally posed a formidable threat to the Allied convoys heading to Russia and back. Despite the Third Reich's efforts to downplay her importance, the Royal Air Force was determined to sink the Tripits. After repeated unsuccessful raids, they eventually concluded that the ship's armor was too strong to be penetrated by conventional munitions and set about designing a bomb with the express purpose of sinking the battleship. They turned the legendary British inventor, Sir Barnes Wallis, the mind behind the legendary bouncing bombs made famous by the Dam Busters. His solution was the Tall Boy. The unique 12,030-pound weapon was designed to be more than a match for the Tripit's armor plating. After a few aborted attempts, in September of 1944, the Royal Air Force launched a daring raid. Despite the loss of nearly a dozen bombers on takeoff, the Brits eventually hit the Tripits with a Tall Boy. The ship was damaged severely, but managed to limp to a nearby port, where it was used as a semi-static artillery battery. The Brits, with no way of knowing how badly they had crippled the ship, decided to try again, and 2 months later they finally ended the feud and capsized the Tripits in a Norwegian fjord. The Bismarck. If the Brits were at war with the Tripits, the entire war effort was at war with the Bismarck. She was built in secrecy and launched in May of 1939. Such was the secrecy surrounding the vessel that by the time she was sighted by a British reconnaissance plane, she had nearly made it into the North Atlantic. With top speeds of 30 knots, which in naval terms was light speed, the Brits knew that if the ship made it unchallenged into the Atlantic Ocean, she could single-handedly sink their entire war efforts. With everything at stake, they sent their best ships to intercept. After a fraught naval battle, the Bismarck and her co-conspirator, the Penn's Eugene, sunk the mighty HMS Hood and crippled the Prince of Wales. The battle took a heavy toll on British morale, and worse, their worst fears had been realized. The Bismarck was loose to run amok in the Atlantic. For the next 3 days, the Allied forces put all their efforts into sinking the Bismarck. In all, it took squadrons of bombers and 3 other warships to finish the job. But on May 29th, the Royal Navy cruiser, the Dorsetshire, put 3 torpedoes into her side, and the Bismarck sank in the cold Atlantic waters. Of her 2,200 crew, only 110 survived. Over the years, the sinking of the Bismarck has been the subject of many films and documentaries, and there are even rumors of a new release. The mighty USS Iowa. The Iowa was one of 4 next-generation World War II super battleships. These Iowa-class battleships had an impressive turn of speed and could cruise at 33 knots in open water. The Iowa was 887 feet or 227 meters long, weighed a staggering 48,500 tons, and her full complement was nearly 2,000 crew. The Iowa-class ships were commissioned in response to Japan's continuing treaty-defying attempts to build ever-superior naval warships. During the Second World War, the Iowa played significant roles escorting convoys across the Atlantic, and then later as part of the Pacific Fleet. She even carried President Roosevelt from the U.S. to North Africa, and at one point was the flagship of the entire U.S. fleet. The Iowa also served in the Korean War. And in fact, despite being decommissioned a number of times, she was active in military service right up to 1980, when she was finally decommissioned after a tragic accident cost the lives of 47 crew members during a routine gunnery exercise. These days, the Iowa, along with the other 4 ships in her class, serves her time as a floating museum. You can find her at the dock in the city of Los Angeles, California. Yamato. During the Second World War, the Yamato and her sister ship, the IJN Musashi, laid claim to the title of the most powerful warships on Earth. Built in defiance of an international treaty, the Yamato was almost twice the legally allowed weight, due to her insane levels of armor. It's said that the Yamato had plating 20 inches thick in places, which was far more than any other vessel on the planet. She was built to ensure Imperial Japanese naval superiority, and she might have secured that claim had it not been for the rise of the aircraft carrier. The Yamato's weight wasn't just for show. The Japanese needed a solid foundation on which they could mount 18.1 feet caliber guns. At that point, the largest on any vessel in history. The Japanese also knew that the US would be unable to build a ship of equal size on the East Coast, and that even if they could build one in the shipyards of New York, it would be too heavy to pass through the Panama Canal. This meant if the US did try to match the Yamato, they would literally have to sail it around the entire planet before they could engage the Yamato and her sister ship. In combat, however, she proved to be less than stellar. Although no tortoise during the Battle of Medway, she failed even to get her huge guns into range before the battle had ended over. She fared better in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and despite sustaining several hits from bombs and torpedoes, she seemed to be earning her reputation as unsinkable. The same could not be said of her sister ship, the Masashi, which was sunk by Allied forces in 1944. In 1945, the Japanese war efforts were in chaos, and in a last-ditch, seemingly suicidal mission, the Yamato was ordered to run around the coast of Okinawa. The idea was to use the ship to create a permanent defense artillery battery. En route, however, she was engaged by the U.S. carrier group. Her anti-aircraft guns blazed for 9 hours, but they were no match for the sustained attack, and her conventional guns proved useless against the aerial assault. Eventually, after a battle that raged for half a day, the ship was rocked by an explosion so powerful it could be seen from the southern coast of Japan, some 120 miles away. The devastating detonation utterly destroyed what was left of the ship, and tragically, of her nearly 2,800-strong crew, only 280 were pulled from the burning wreckage in cold waters. So what could possibly top a list of such formidable, legendary warships? Where can we go after the legend of Bismarck, the history of the Victory, or the sheer size of the Yamato? Well, there's only one place we can go, and where we're going, we don't need roads, which is handy since this video is about ships. That's right, friends, we're headed for the future. The USS Zumwalt destroyer, aka the stealth battleship. The days of lumbering hulks of steels as tall as buildings and longer than a freight train are over. These days, the key to owning the seas is to do it quietly. Somewhere out there on the internet, someone in a bunker full of model ships, wearing a captain's hat and surrounded by books about war, there will be someone hurling nautical abuse at their screen, because we're calling the USS Zumwalt a battleship. But we don't care, because the USS Zumwalt is the future king of warships, just like our battleships were king in their day. So what makes it special? Well, unlike the others on the list, the idea behind the Zumwalt is not to demonstrate your naval superiority with big numbers and firepower. It's secret. It's secrecy itself. The Zumwalt is designed to have a radar signature more akin to a fishing boat. If it's picked up at all, and its low profile and especially neuroflexive surfaces mean the vessel is hard to see with the naked eye. Its sleek hull design also means it's faster than NASA's broadband. Weapons come in the shape of long-range cruise missiles, but the DDG-1000 also boasts an impressive array of high-caliber guns. Is the DDG-1000 USS Zumwalt the battleship of the future? Tell us what you think. Do you have a favorite? Would you like to see more films like Sink the Bismarck? Why didn't we include the HMS Hood, or the USS Indianapolis, or another ship? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more top 10 and more amazing videos. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Let us know which one of these was your favorite in the comments. And if you liked the video, don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.